I'm James Wellington, 42, and for 3 years I watched my world crumble from behind prison bars. The day I was sentenced for a crime I didn't commit, my 16-year-old daughter Chloe looked me in the eyes and whispered, "I still believe you, Dad." But when I won my appeal and walked free, I discovered she had changed her last name to her mother's maiden name and moved 2,000 miles away. The betrayal cut deeper than any prison sentence ever could. What I didn't know was that my fight for freedom was just the beginning, and the truth about why she left would test everything I thought I knew about family, forgiveness, and the price of justice. If you've ever wondered whether love can survive when everything else falls apart, like this video and subscribe for stories that will change how you see redemption. The arrest warrant still haunts my dreams. March 15, 2021, a Tuesday that started like any other but ended with my life in ruins. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw 2 detectives on my porch, their expressions grim and businesslike. "James Wellington?" The taller one asked when I opened the door. "Yes, that's me. You're under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud." The words hit me like a physical blow. Chloe had just gotten home from soccer practice, her cleats still muddy, her face flushed with teenage excitement about making varsity. She was in the kitchen making a snack when she heard the commotion. "Dad?" Her voice cracked as she appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene 2 officers, handcuffs glinting in the afternoon light, her father's face drained of color. "There's been a mistake," I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is all a misunderstanding." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. My business partner, Timothy, had been acting strange lately. Nervous phone calls, locked filing cabinets, rushed explanations about client accounts. I'd pushed aside my concerns, trusted him like I had for 8 years. The handcuffs were cold against my wrists. Chloe ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "I still believe you, Dad," she whispered, her arms around my waist despite the officer's presence. Those words, they became my lifeline through everything that followed. Karen arrived home 20 minutes later to find news vans already gathering outside our suburban house. Her face went white when she saw me in the back of the patrol car, but not with shock, with something else. Fear, maybe. Or anger. That night from my cell, I called home. Karen answered on the first ring. "How could you do this to us?" She hissed before I could speak. "I didn't do anything, Karen. You know me. I don't know anything anymore. The media is calling every hour. Chloe's friends' parents are asking questions. Our neighbors won't look me in the eye. Let me talk to Chloe. Absolutely not. She's been through enough." The line went dead. Within 48 hours, our comfortable middle-class life became a nightmare. Local news ran my mugshot alongside headlines about the missing $2.3 million from client accounts. The accounting firm fired me immediately. Our joint bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. Karen filed for separation before I even made bail. "It's temporary," she told me when I finally got home, "just until this gets sorted out." But I could see it in her eyes. She'd already decided I was guilty. The visiting schedule log became my most treasured possession, a worn piece of paper that tracked the slow death of my relationship with Chloe. Week 1, Tuesday. Thursday, Saturday. Week 2, Tuesday, Saturday. By month 6, just Saturdays. By year 2, maybe twice a month. Those first visits were everything to me. Chloe would sit across from me in the sterile visiting room, her hands pressed against the glass partition, telling me about school, her friends, her latest art project. She was 17 then, still my little girl despite everything. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" I'd ask every time. "I'm fine, Dad. Don't worry about me. Just focus on proving you're innocent." But I could see the toll in her eyes, dark circles from sleepless nights, a forced brightness that didn't quite hide her pain. She'd grown thinner, more serious. The carefree teenager who used to sing off-key in the car was disappearing, replaced By someone carrying burdens too heavy for her age. Karen never came. Not once in 3 years. She's busy, Chloe would explain. Work is crazy right now, but I knew the truth. Karen had written me off completely. In her mind, I was already guilty. Already gone. She was protecting herself, building a new life that didn't include a convicted felon husband. The other inmates sized me up quickly. White-collar crime, they said. Probably soft. Probably wouldn't last. A few tried to test me early on, but I'd learned something important about survival. Keep your head down, don't make enemies, and never, ever talk about your case. What you in for? My cellmate Rico asked on my 3rd night. Embezzlement, I said simply. He nodded. You do it? No, they all say that. He rolled over, conversation finished. But as months passed, something shifted. Maybe it was the way I carried myself, or how I never complained about my situation. Maybe it was because I actually helped other inmates with their legal paperwork, using my accounting background to make sense of complex financial documents. Slowly, some began to believe. By Chloe's senior year, the visits became strained. She'd arrive late, leave early, spend half the time on her phone. I could feel her slipping away. How's college planning going? I asked during one visit. Good. Mom's helping me with applications. What schools are you looking at? She shrugged. Mostly in-state. Cheaper that way. The distance in her voice was new, clinical, like she was talking to a stranger. Chloe, what's wrong? You seem... Nothing's wrong, Dad. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. I could see it in the way she avoided eye contact, the way she fidgeted with her sleeves. Something was happening at home. Something Karen wasn't telling me. The last visit, though I didn't know it would be the last, came 2 months before my appeal hearing. Chloe sat across from me, more composed than I'd ever seen her. 18 now, legally an adult. Dad, I need to tell you something. My heart stopped. What is it? I'm going to take a break from visiting for a while. I need to focus on graduation, college applications. It's hard, you know. I wanted to argue, to beg her not to abandon me when I was so close to proving my innocence. But looking at her face, I saw someone who'd been carrying a terrible weight for too long. I understand, I lied. Do what you need to do. She nodded, relief flooding her features. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. As she walked away, I had no idea it would be 3 years before I'd see her again. The court filing notice that would eventually free me came from the most unlikely source, my cellmate Tommy Briggs, a former public defender who'd been disbarred for cocaine possession. He'd been studying my case files for months, spreading documents across our tiny cell like a war room. Your lawyer was an idiot, Tommy said bluntly one evening, pointing at my trial transcripts. He never challenged the chain of custody on the financial records. Never questioned why the security footage from your office building mysteriously disappeared. The footage was corrupted, I said, repeating what my attorney had told me. Technical malfunction, Tommy laughed bitterly. James, I've seen this playbook 100 times. Convenient technical malfunctions are rarely technical or malfunctions. Your partner Timothy had access to that security system, didn't he? I thought back too. Those final weeks before my arrest, Timothy constantly in the office after hours, claiming he was catching up on paperwork. His new expensive watch, the lease on a BMW, he claimed was a company car. Signs I'd been too trusting to see. You think he set me up? I think he stole that money and needed a fall guy. And you, my friend, were perfect, trusting, access to all the accounts. No criminal record to make you paranoid about covering your tracks. That night, I stared at the ceiling and replayed every interaction with Timothy over our 8-year partnership, the gradual changes in his behavior, the way he'd started handling certain clients exclusively, the locked filing cabinet he claimed contained confidential client information. Tommy helped me draft a letter to the Innocence Project. 3 months later, attorney Sarah Chun took my case pro bono. "Mr. Wellington," she said during our first meeting, "I've reviewed your file. There are significant issues with your conviction, but I need you to understand appeals take time. Years, possibly, and there's no guarantee." "I have nothing but time," I told her. She smiled grimly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The breakthrough came 18 months later. Sarah's investigator tracked down the original security company that had serviced our building. Buried in their backup servers, they found the footage that had supposedly been corrupted. The video was crystal clear. Timothy, alone in our office at 11:47 p.m. on January 23, 2021, 3 weeks before my arrest. He was transferring files from my computer to his laptop, systematically covering his tracks. "This changes everything," Sarah told me over the phone. We also found evidence that Timothy had been skimming from client accounts for over 2 years. "He used your access codes, your digital signature. It's all here." My hands shook as I held the receiver. "What happens now?" "We file for immediate appeal based on newly discovered evidence. The district attorney will have to respond. If they're smart, they'll drop the charges rather than face the embarrassment of prosecuting an innocent man." That night I called Chloe. For the first time in months. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. "Dad? Sweetheart, I have incredible news. They found evidence video footage that proves I'm innocent. My lawyer thinks I could be home within weeks." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Chloe, that's great, Dad." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm really happy for you." But she didn't sound happy. She sounded afraid. "I know it's been hard," I said, "but we can be a family again. I can help you with college, we can." "Dad, I have to go. I have a test tomorrow." "Of course. I love you, Chloe. Love you too." The line went dead, leaving me with a hollow victory. I was about to win my freedom, but something in my daughter's voice told me I might have already lost what mattered most. The bus ticket stub in my wallet read Millfield Correctional to downtown. Terminal, $12.50. Such a small price for a journey I'd dreamed about for 3 years. But as the Greyhound pulled away from the prison gates, I felt none of the joy I'd imagined. Freedom was supposed to taste sweet. Instead, it tasted like fear and uncertainty. I'd expected someone to pick me up, Chloe, maybe even Karen, despite everything. But Sarah Chun had simply handed me an envelope with $200 cash and said, "Good luck, James, you're going to need it." The bus ride gave me time to think, to plan what I'd say when I saw my family. 3 years of imagined conversations, of apologies, and explanations and promises to make everything right. I'd rehearsed every word. None of it prepared me for Karen's face when she opened the door. "James." Not a greeting, just an acknowledgement. Like I was a delivery she'd been expecting but didn't want. "Karen." I stood on the porch of what used to be our home, suddenly aware of how I must look prison pale, wearing donated clothes that didn't quite fit, carrying everything I owned in a paper bag. "You look," she started, then stopped. "Different." "Where's Chloe?" "She's visiting my sister in Oregon. Has been for the past month." "Oregon?" The word hit me like a slap. "What's she doing in Oregon?" Karen stepped back, not inviting me in. "She needed space, James. Time to process everything that's happened." "But I'm free. They dropped all charges." "The real evidence." "I know about the evidence." Her voice was sharp. "Congratulations, you were right all along." There was no warmth in her congratulations, no relief or happiness. Just a cold acknowledgement that made my stomach turn. "Can I come in?" "Just for a few minutes?" She hesitated, then opened the door wider. The house looked the same, but felt like a museum, familiar objects in familiar places, but somehow frozen, untouchable. Family photos had been rearranged. Some were missing entirely. "Coffee?" she offered, more from politeness than kindness. "That would be nice." We sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals, planned Chloe's birthdays, argued about bills and schedules, and all the mundane things that make up a marriage. Now we sat like strangers. How is she really? I asked. Karen's composure cracked slightly. She's struggling, James, has been for years. The media attention, the trial, kids at school, it was brutal. I never wanted that for her. But it happened. Anyway, Karen's words carried an accusation. Being innocent doesn't erase the damage. I want to call her. She's not ready. Not ready? Karen, I'm her father. I've been locked away for 3 years for something I didn't do. Don't you think she's been through enough? The question hung between us like a blade. I realized then that Karen wasn't just protecting Chloe from the world, she was protecting her from me. What aren't you telling me? Karen stood abruptly, our conversation clearly over. She'll contact you when she's ready, James. You need to respect that. This is my daughter we're talking about. Yes, it is. And she's not the same little girl who used to wait for you to come home from work. Prison changed you, but the world changed her too. As I walked back to the bus stop with nowhere to go and no one waiting for me, I understood that proving my innocence was just the beginning. The real battle winning back my daughter's heart was going to be much harder than anything I'd faced behind bars. The school records request form seemed simple enough until I tried to fill it out. Relationship to student, it asked. I wrote father in confident letters, then provided Chloe's full name, Chloe Wellington. The administrative assistant at Millfield. Hy looked at me with confusion when I handed over the paperwork 3 days later. I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington, but we don't have a student by that name. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Chloe Wellington, senior class, graduation is next month. Oh. Her face lit up with recognition. You mean Chloe Brennan? Yes, she's one of our top students. Are you a relative? Brennan. Karen's maiden name. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the counter to steady myself. I'm her father. The woman's expression shifted to one of careful professional concern. Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification and legal documentation. Proving your relationship to the student. Legal documentation? My voice came out hoarse. She's my daughter. I've been her father for 19 years. But even as I said it, I understood what had happened. While I was locked away, fighting for my freedom, my daughter had legally erased me from her identity. I drove to Karen's house in a daze, the school records clutched in my shaking hands. This time I didn't knock, I pounded on the door, until she answered. She changed her name. I held up the papers. You let her change her name to yours. Karen's face went pale, but she stood her ground. James, calm down. Calm down? My daughter legally removed me from her life, and you're telling me to calm down? It wasn't about you, she said quietly. It was about survival. Survival? Do you have any idea what it was like for her? Walking into school every day while your face was on the evening news? Having kids whisper, "Embezzler's daughter," when she passed in the halls? The words hit me like physical blows. So you helped her run away from me. I helped her protect herself. The name change gave her anonymity, a fresh start. She could apply to colleges without carrying the baggage of your conviction. But I'm innocent. The charges were dropped. That happened last month, James. She's lived with this shame for 3 years. 3 years of therapy, of panic attacks, of social isolation. Changing her name wasn't about rejecting you, it was about reclaiming her life. I sank into the porch chair, the fight draining out of me. Where exactly in Oregon is she? Karen hesitated. Portland. She's staying with my sister Linda while she finishes her senior year online. Online? She's not even going to graduate with her class? She couldn't face walking across that stage with everyone staring, everyone remembering. This way she can graduate quietly, start college without the whispers following her. What college? Another hesitation. Portland State. She got a partial scholarship. She got into college and didn't tell me. James, you have to understand, she's been protecting you too. She didn't want you to feel guilty about the choices she had to make. I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 15 years, this stranger who'd helped my daughter disappear. I need her address. I can't give you that. She's my daughter. And she's 19 years old. Legally an adult who gets to choose who she wants in her life. The words were a knife to my chest. In trying to save myself, I'd lost the person who mattered most. And the cruelest part was understanding that Chloe Brennan now had been trying to save us both. The private investigator's business card felt heavy in my pocket. Mitchell and Associates, we find people. The irony wasn't lost on me. I needed to hire a stranger to find my own daughter. Frank. Mitchell was a retired police detective with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. His office smelled like coffee and old case files. Mr. Wellington, I've read about your case in the papers. Hell of a thing. What happened to you? Thank you. I need to find my daughter. Your ex-wife won't give you her address? Claims she's protecting Chloe's privacy. Says she's an adult now and gets to choose who she wants contact with. Frank nodded slowly. Legally, she's right. But emotionally? That's your kid. I get it. He pulled out a notepad. What can you tell me about her current situation? I gave him everything I knew: Linda's last name, Portland State University, the rough timeline of when Chloe had moved. Within 48 hours, Frank called back. Found her. She's living in the Hawthorne district, sharing an apartment with her aunt. Goes by Chloe Brennan now, has for about 2 years from what I can tell. 2 years? My voice cracked. She changed her name while I was still fighting my appeal. Gets worse, I'm afraid. She's got social media accounts under the new name. Want me to send you the links? That night, I sat in my motel room staring at my laptop screen. There she was, my daughter, but not my daughter. Chloe Brennan had long, auburn hair now, not the blonde curls I remembered. She'd gotten her nose pierced. Her smile was different too, more guarded, more adult. The photos told a story I wasn't part of. Chloe at coffee shops with friends I didn't recognize. Chloe hiking in the Columbia River Gorge. Chloe at what looked like a school dance, wearing a blue dress that made her look impossibly grown up. The captions were what broke me. Senior year vibes with my Portland crew, grateful for fresh starts and new beginnings. Sometimes you have to leave everything behind to find yourself. But it was Karen's social media that really twisted the knife. Post after post painting herself as a heroic single mother who'd protected her daughter through unimaginable circumstances. Pictures of her and Chloe together with captions like, "My brave girl," and "Just the two of us, against the world." She'd rewritten our family history. In Karen's version, I'd simply vanished from their lives, leaving her to raise Chloe alone. There was no mention of wrongful conviction, no acknowledgement that I'd been fighting for my freedom and my family. I was just gone, erased as completely as if I'd never existed. But the most damning evidence was in the details Frank had uncovered. Chloe hadn't just changed her name impulsively after I was arrested. The legal paperwork was dated 6 months after my conviction, meaning she'd lived with my supposed guilt for half a year before deciding to cut ties completely. There's something else, Frank told me during our follow-up meeting. Your daughter's been seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Goldman, specializes in trauma and family dysfunction. Been going regularly for about 18 months. Trauma. The word tasted bitter. I caused my daughter trauma. James, you didn't cause anything. You were railroaded by a corrupt business partner and a legal system that failed you. Your daughter's trauma comes from the situation, not from you personally. But his words felt hollow. Looking at those social media posts, at the life Chloe had built 2,000 miles away from me, one thing was crystal clear. She wasn't just surviving without me, she was thriving. The question that kept me awake at night was whether my presence in her life would heal her wounds or reopen them. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe the kindest thing I could do was let my daughter stay lost. The bundle of unsent letters came from the most unexpected source, Chloe's former best friend, Ashley Monroe. She contacted me through Facebook 3 weeks after Frank had found Chloe's address. Mr. Wellington? This is Ashley. I was friends with Chloe all through high school. I saw on the news about your conviction being overturned. I have something that belongs to you. We met at a Starbucks near her college. Ashley had grown up too. She was studying pre-med now, serious and thoughtful in a way that reminded me painfully of Chloe. She wrote these during your trial, Ashley said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. She'd bring them to school, work on them during lunch. I asked her once why she never sent them, and she said, Ashley's voice broke slightly. She said you had enough to worry about without her problems. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. 23 letters, all addressed to me in Chloe's careful handwriting. Some were written on notebook paper, others on stationery with little flowers around the borders. The dates spanned from 6 months after my arrest until just before my conviction. The first letter was dated September 15th, 2021. Dear Dad, today was the first day of school and everyone was staring at me. Not because of my new haircut or because I finally got contacts, but because of the news stories. Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside after English and asked if I was okay at home. I wanted to tell her that home isn't the problem, home is the only place where I can still remember what normal feels like. But I just nodded and said I was fine. I keep telling everyone you're innocent, but I can see in their eyes that they don't believe me. Sometimes I wonder if they think I'm naive, or if they feel sorry for me. I hate both options. I miss our Sunday morning pancakes. I miss how you'd let me pick the music in the car. I miss having someone who understood my terrible math jokes. Mom says I shouldn't get my hopes up about the trial, that I need to prepare for reality. But I know you didn't do this. Dad, I know it in my bones. Love, Chloe. I had to stop reading. The coffee shop blurred through my tears. Ashley reached across the table and squeezed my hand. There are more, she said gently. Some of them are harder to read. The letters chronicled Chloe's slow descent into isolation and shame. By November, she was writing about classmates whispering when she walked by. By January, she was eating lunch alone in the library. By March, she was begging Karen to let her transfer schools. But it was a letter dated 2 weeks before my sentencing that shattered me completely. Dear Dad, I've been thinking about changing my name. Not because I don't love you, but because I can't keep carrying this weight. Every time someone says Wellington, I see pity in their eyes. Or worse, judgment. Ashley thinks I'm being dramatic, but she doesn't understand what it's like. Her dad coaches Little League and helps with math homework. Mine is on trial for stealing money from old people trying to retire. I know you didn't do it. I've never stopped believing that. But believing in your innocence doesn't make the shame go away. It doesn't make the whispers stop or the stares disappear. I've been accepted to 3 colleges. Dad, 3 schools that don't know anything about our family drama. I could go there as Chloe Brennan and just be a normal kid again. No baggage. No explanations. No pitying looks from professors who've seen the news. Is that terrible? Does that make me a bad daughter? I love you so much it physically hurts sometimes. But I'm drowning. Dad, and I don't know how to save both of us. Forever your daughter, no matter what name I use. Chloe. She cried when she wrote that one, Ashley said quietly. She brought it to school the next day, completely wrecked. I'd never seen her like that before. Why didn't she send them? She said you were fighting for your life and freedom. She didn't want to burden you with her problems. She thought, Ashley paused, choosing her words carefully. She thought loving you meant protecting you from how much she was suffering. I thought about all those visits when Chloe had seemed fine, cheerful even. The bright smile, the positive updates about school and friends. She'd been performing for me, hiding her pain so I wouldn't have another weight to carry in my cell. The name change wasn't about running away from you, Ashley continued. It was about running toward a future where she could be your daughter, without being ashamed of it. Does that make sense? It did. Painfully, completely, it made perfect sense. Is she happy now? In Portland? Ashley considered the question. She's surviving. She's functional. But happy? I don't think Chloe's been truly happy since the day you were arrested. She's just gotten very good at pretending. As I drove back to my motel with the letters in my passenger seat, I realized that Chloe hadn't abandoned me. She'd been trying to save both of us the only way an 18-year-old girl knew how. And in doing so, she'd sacrificed her own happiness for mine. The question now was whether it was too late to save hers. The Greyhound ticket to Portland cost me $347, nearly all the money I had left. I bought it at 2 a.m. after reading Chloe's letters for the 4th time, my heart breaking with each word. Waiting for her to be ready suddenly felt like the cruelest form of cowardice. The bus journey took 36 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching America scroll past like a movie I'd forgotten I was part of. 3 years in prison had made the outside world feel foreign, all these people living their lives, going to jobs, picking up groceries, completely unaware that time had stopped for me in 2021. I'd called ahead and found a cheap motel 6 blocks from Linda's address. The Sunset Inn looked like the kind of place where people went to disappear, which seemed fitting. My room smelled like disinfectant and old cigarettes, but it had a clear view of the street where my daughter now lived. On my first morning in Portland, I walked past Linda's house 3 times before getting up the courage to approach. It was a modest craftsman bungalow with a garden full of roses and a Honda Civic in the driveway. Normal, safe, the kind of place where a traumatized teenager could heal. I was standing across the street, trying to decide whether to knock on the door. When she appeared, Chloe walked out of the house at 8:47 a.m. carrying a coffee mug and a backpack. She was taller than I remembered, her hair longer and darker. She wore jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, looking like any other college student starting her day. But it was unmistakably my daughter. The way she tilted her head when she locked the door, the careful way she descended the front steps, these were gestures I'd watched 1,000 times when she was little. She climbed into the Honda and drove away before I could move. I stood there for 10 more minutes, rooted to the sidewalk by the overwhelming reality of seeing her again. That became my routine. Every morning at 8:45, I'd position myself across the street and wait for Chloe to emerge. I told myself I was just trying to understand her new life, to see if she was truly okay. But really, I was feeding an addiction, the desperate need to be near the person I loved most in the world. Even if she didn't know I existed, I followed her to Portland State University, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice me. I watched her meet friends at coffee shops, saw her laugh at jokes I couldn't hear. She seemed lighter here, more relaxed than she'd been during those final prison visits. One afternoon, I almost approached her. She was sitting alone on a bench outside the library, reading a book for what looked like a literature class. The late afternoon sun caught her hair, and for a moment she looked exactly like the 7-year-old who used to curl up in my lap while I read her bedtime stories. Started walking toward her, my heart pounding, rehearsing what I'd say. "Hi, sweetheart. I know this is unexpected, but I had to see you. I had to know you were okay." But as I got closer, I saw the title of her book, Trauma and Recovery, The Aftermath of Violence. My steps slowed. She wasn't just reading for class, this was research. Self-help, an attempt to understand her own psychological landscape. I stopped walking. Here was my daughter, 3 years later, still trying to heal from the damage my situation had caused. And here I was, about to force my presence back into her carefully constructed new life. What right did I have to disrupt her healing? What if seeing me triggered another spiral? What if my need to reconnect was purely selfish? I turned around and walked back to my motel, hating myself for my cowardice, but knowing it was the right choice. If I was going to contact Chloe, it had to be on her terms, in her time, in a way that prioritized her well-being over my desperate need for reconciliation. But that night, Lying in my narrow motel bed, I made a decision. I couldn't keep stalking my own daughter like some kind of emotional predator. I had to either commit to reaching out properly or leave Portland entirely. The next morning, instead of taking my usual position across from Linda's house, I knocked on the front door. Linda answered the door holding a coffee mug and wearing the wary expression of someone who'd been expecting trouble. She was older than Karen, with graying hair and laugh lines that suggested a lifetime of being the family peacekeeper. "You must be James," she said before I could introduce myself. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry to show up unannounced, but Karen called yesterday. Said you might be coming around." Her voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "Chloe's at school." "I know. I was hoping to talk to you first." She studied my face for a long moment, then stepped back to let me in. "Coffee?" "That would be nice." Linda's house felt like a sanctuary: warm lighting, soft furniture, bookshelves filled with novels and poetry. Family photos covered the mantel, including several recent ones of Chloe looking genuinely happy. "She's a good kid," Linda said, following my gaze to the photos. "Been through hell, but she's stronger than she knows." "How is she? Really?" Linda poured coffee into 2 mugs, taking her time with the sugar and cream. "You want the polite answer or the truth?" "The truth. Always the truth. She's been in therapy twice a week for the past year. Panic attacks, depression, severe anxiety about her future. She changed her name because kids at school were calling her criminal's daughter, and she couldn't take it anymore." Each word was a knife to my chest. "I never wanted. I know you didn't. And I know you're innocent." Karen showed me the news, articles about your exoneration. Linda sat across from me at her kitchen table. "But knowing you didn't commit a crime doesn't erase what happened to that girl." "What exactly did happen?" "Karen won't tell me details." Linda was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Finally, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a photograph: Chloe and me at her 8th grade graduation, both of us beaming at the camera. "You were a good father, James. I watched you with her when she was little, patient, involved, loving. That's what makes this so tragic. Makes what tragic. She thinks she failed you. That she wasn't strong enough to weather the storm, wasn't loyal enough to stick by you through the trial. The name change, the move to Portland in her mind. These are betrayals she can never take back." I stared at the photo, remembering that day. Chloe had been so proud of her honor roll certificate, had insisted we celebrate with ice cream even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "She didn't betray me," I said quietly. "She was surviving. I know that. You know that. But she's 19 years old and carrying guilt that would crush most adults." Linda leaned forward. "She talks about you constantly. Wonders how you're doing, whether you hate her, if you'll ever forgive her for abandoning you. There's nothing to forgive. Then you need to tell her that." "But James," Linda's voice grew stern, "you need to be prepared for this to be harder than you think. She's not the same girl who visited you in prison. She's been through trauma, therapy, complete identity reconstruction. She's fragile in ways that might not be obvious. I don't want to hurt her. I believe that. But impact matters more than intention. If you're going to do this, you need to do it right. Slowly, carefully, with her well-being as the priority. Will you help me?" Linda studied my face again, and I could see her making a decision. Karen's going to be furious. She's built her whole identity around protecting Chloe from further pain. "Protecting her from me, you mean? Can you blame her? For 3 years, your name was associated with trauma and shame. Even now that you're exonerated, you represent a very dark chapter in Chloe's life. So what do? You start small. A letter, maybe. Something she can read in private, process at her own pace. No pressure, no demands for immediate reconciliation. Just," Linda paused, choosing her words carefully, "just let her know you're proud of the woman she's become, and that you don't need her to carry any guilt about the choices she made to survive." "You really think a letter would work?" I think it's the only thing that might work. Showing up here, ambushing her, that's about your needs, not hers. A letter lets her control the pace, decide how and when to respond. Linda went to her desk and returned with paper and an envelope. Write it now while you're thinking clearly. I'll make sure she gets it. As I sat at Linda's kitchen table, trying to find words that could bridge 3 years of separation and pain, I realized this was the most important thing I'd ever written. Not a legal brief or a business proposal, but a father's attempt to reconnect with a daughter who'd been forced to choose between loyalty and survival. And somehow, she'd managed to choose both. Linda disappeared upstairs and returned with a leather-bound journal, its pages worn from frequent handling. "Before you write that letter," she said, "you need to understand where Chloe's head has been." Her therapist suggested journaling as a way to process everything that happened. She left this here last month and asked me to keep it safe. Should I be reading her private thoughts? She gave me permission to share whatever might help if you ever came looking for her. She's been hoping for this conversation, but too afraid to initiate it herself. I opened the journal to a random page, dated 6 months earlier. Dr. Goldman asked me today what I'm most afraid of. I told her I'm afraid Dad hates me for changing my name, for moving away, for not being strong enough to stand by him when he needed me most. But that's not the whole truth. What I'm really afraid of is that I'll never be able to look at him without remembering how it felt to be ashamed of who I was. Not ashamed of him, ashamed of being his daughter in a world that had decided he was guilty, that I know he's innocent now. The news articles about his exoneration are saved on my phone. I've read them dozens of times. But knowing he didn't commit those crimes doesn't erase the 3 years when I believed everyone who said he did. Doesn't erase the times I wondered if maybe, just maybe, they were right. How do you apologize to someone for doubting them when they needed your faith the most? I had to stop reading. The pain in her words was too raw, too familiar. I'd spent countless nights in prison wondering if she still believed in me, never knowing she was spending those same nights hating herself for moments of doubt. She thinks. She failed you, Linda said gently. Every major decision she's made for the past 3 years has been shaped by that belief. I flipped to another entry, this one more recent. Today marks 2 years since I legally became Chloe Brennan. I thought I'd feel different by now, free, maybe, or at least at peace with the choice. Instead, I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Chloe Wellington loved her father unconditionally and believed in justice and truth. Chloe Brennan is practical and self-protective and always has an escape plan. Some days I can't remember which one is real. Ashley called yesterday. She said she ran into Dad at a coffee shop back home. He looked thin but healthy, and he asked about me. She told him I was doing well in college, that I seemed happy. I'm not happy. I'm functional. There's a difference. I want to call him, but what would I say? Hi, Dad. Sorry I abandoned you when you needed me most, but I was too weak to handle being associated with a convicted felon. Thanks for going to prison for 3 years so I could learn that I'm not as loyal or brave as I thought I was. Maybe some bridges can't be rebuilt. Maybe some damage is permanent. She's been carrying this guilt for years, I said, closing the journal, blaming herself for being human. Trauma does that. It convinces you that survival is betrayal, that self-preservation is selfishness. Linda refilled my coffee cup. The thing is, James, she's not wrong about some of it. She did choose her own well-being over loyalty to you. But that's not a character flaw. That's what any reasonable person would do when faced with impossible circumstances. How do I convince her of that? By showing her that you understand why she made those choices, and that you don't need her to apologize for them. By proving that your love isn't conditional on her being perfect. I thought about the visits when she'd seemed so together, so supportive. Even then, barely 18 years old, she'd been trying to take care of me while secretly falling apart. What kind of letter do I write to someone who's been punishing herself for 3 years for the crime of being human? Linda smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. You write the letter you wish someone had written to you when you were sitting in that prison cell, wondering if you were strong enough to survive what was happening to your family. Honest, vulnerable, without expectations. Exactly. Don't ask her for anything. Don't pressure her to respond or meet with you. She paused, looking at one of the photos of Chloe on her mantle. Just let her know that the father who loves her understands the daughter who survived. As I picked up the pen Linda had given me, I realized this letter wasn't just about reconnecting with Chloe. It was about releasing both of us from the prison of shame and guilt we'd been carrying. She'd been punishing herself for not being strong enough, and I'd been punishing myself for not protecting her from the consequences of my situation. Maybe healing meant accepting that we'd both done the best we could with impossible circumstances. Maybe forgiveness started with forgiving ourselves. I stared at the blank paper for nearly an hour before I found the courage to write the first word. How do you compress 3 years of separation, pain, and love into a single letter? How do you rebuild a relationship that was shattered by circumstances neither of you could control? Finally, I began. My dearest Chloe, I'm writing this from Aunt Linda's kitchen table, and my hands are shaking. Not from nervousness, from relief. After 3 years of wondering if you were okay, if you were happy, if you could ever forgive me for the chaos my situation brought into your life, I finally have a chance to tell you what I should have said long ago. You don't need to apologize for anything. Not for changing your name, not for moving to Portland, not for protecting yourself when the world became too heavy to carry, not for being 19 years old and making the survival choices that any reasonable person would make. Ashley gave me the letters you wrote but never sent. I've read every word a dozen times, and my heart breaks not because you doubted me. That would have been natural and understandable, but because you've been carrying guilt for being human. Sweetheart, you were 16 when this nightmare began. 16. I was a grown man with life experience and legal resources, and there were nights in prison when I barely held myself together. You were a child trying to navigate high school while your father's mugshot was on the evening news. The fact that you survived it all makes me proud beyond words. The fact that you thrived, that you graduated, got into college, built a new life for yourself, that makes you a hero in my story. Not a traitor. I know now about the therapy, about the panic attacks, about kids at school calling you names I can't bear to repeat. I know you changed your name not because you stopped loving me, but because you were drowning and needed a life preserver. I know you moved across the country, not to abandon me, but to save yourself. These weren't betrayals, Chloe, they were acts of courage. I spent 3 years in prison, but you spent 3 years in a different kind of cage, trapped between loyalty to me and the need to protect your own mental health and future. At least my bars were visible. Yours were made of shame and obligation and the impossible weight of other people's expectations. You chose yourself, and I am so grateful you did. The charges against me were dropped because new evidence proved what we both knew: I didn't steal that money. But proving my innocence doesn't erase the damage those 3 years caused to your life, your sense of safety, your trust in the world. Being exonerated doesn't give me the right to walk back into your life and expect everything to return to how it was. You're 21 now. An adult who gets to choose who she wants in her life and when. I'm not writing this letter to pressure you or guilt you or demand immediate reconciliation. I'm writing it because I need you to know something that I should have told you years ago. My love for you has never been conditional on your perfection. It doesn't require you to be stronger than any teenager should have to be. It doesn't demand that you sacrifice your well-being for my emotional needs. You could stay Chloe Brennan forever, never speak to me again, build a life where I exist only as a chapter you'd rather forget, and I would still be proud to have been your father for the first 16 years of your life. I would still consider those years the greatest privilege of my existence. But if someday, not today, not next week, but someday when you're ready, if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. If you want to meet for coffee and just sit in comfortable silence, I'll be here. If you want to yell at me about everything you went through while I was locked away, unable to protect you, I'll be here for that too. I'm working now as a forensic accountant, helping other people who've been wrongfully accused navigate the financial investigations that can prove their innocence. It's meaningful work, born from understanding how devastating it is when the system fails. But mostly, I think about you. I wonder if you're happy, if you're dating anyone, what your favorite classes are, whether you still laugh at terrible jokes the way you used to. I wonder if you know that every good thing I am as a person came from being your father. Linda has my phone number and address. Use them if and when you want to. Don't use them if you don't. Either choice is okay with me, because my job as your father was never to make you responsible for my happiness. I love you, Chloe Wellington. I love you, Chloe Brennan. I love whoever you choose to become next. That love doesn't have conditions or expiration dates or requirements for reciprocation. You saved yourself when I couldn't save you. That doesn't make you disloyal, it makes you strong. Forever proud of you. DADPS, I still think your math jokes are terrible. I hope you haven't stopped making them. I folded the letter carefully and handed it to Linda, along with my business card containing my phone number and email address. When will you give it to her? Tonight, when she gets home from her study group. I'll tell her you stopped by, that you seemed well, and that you wanted her to have this. Linda tucked the letter into her purse. James, you should prepare yourself for the possibility that she won't respond right away, or at all. I know. This isn't about what I need anymore, it's about what she needs. That's exactly the right attitude. I stood to leave, feeling simultaneously drained and hopeful. Thank you for taking care of her, for giving her a safe place to land. She's family. That's what family does. As I walked back to my motel, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd spent 3 years in prison fighting to prove my innocence, and 3 more months fighting to understand why that victory had felt so hollow. Now I knew winning my legal freedom meant nothing if my daughter was still imprisoned by guilt and shame. The letter was my attempt to give her what the courts had given me, exoneration. Not for crime she'd committed, but for the sin of being human under impossible circumstances. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. A text from an unknown number. I got your letter. 3 days later, another text. Your math jokes were never terrible. They were dad jokes. There's a difference. And then, after a week of silence, would it be okay if I called you sometime? Not today, but sometime? I stared at that message for 10 minutes before responding. Anytime, sweetheart. Absolutely anytime. It wasn't reconciliation yet, it was just a door opening. But after 3 years of locked doors and silence, even the possibility of conversation felt like a miracle. The first text exchange came 3 weeks after I'd left the letter with Linda. I was sitting in my cramped apartment in Seattle. I'd moved there for a fresh start, away from the memories of my old life, when my phone buzzed with a message from that same unknown number. This is going to sound weird, but what's your favorite color now? I realized I don't know if prison changed things like that for you. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes before responding. Still blue. Specifically, the blue of your kindergarten backpack that you insisted on taking everywhere, even to grocery stores. What about you? Green now. Forest green. I think being in Portland changed that, all the trees and rain. I used to hate green. Change isn't always bad. No, I guess it isn't. For the next month, our conversations existed entirely in these small exchanges. Never more than a few messages at a time. Never about anything too heavy or meaningful. She told me about her literature classes, her part-time job at a bookstore, her discovery that she actually liked hiking. I told her about my new work helping exonerated prisoners navigate their financial rehabilitation, about learning to cook for myself, about the therapy I'd started to deal with my own prison trauma. You're in therapy too, she texted one evening. Twice a week. Turns out wrongful imprisonment leaves some psychological scars, even when you know you're innocent. What kind of scars? I considered how honest to be. Hypervigilance. Trust issues. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm still in my cell. Your therapist probably has a name for it. PTSD. Dr. Goldman says it's more common than people think, especially in cases where someone's entire worldview gets shattered. Is that what happened to you? Shattered worldview? A long pause then. I used to believe that good people were protected from terrible things. That if you were honest and kind and worked hard, life would be fair to you. Watching what happened to our family, it broke that belief. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from learning that lesson so young. You couldn't protect yourself from it either, Dad. We both learned it together. It was the first time she'd called me Dad in a text message. I screenshotted it and stared at it for an hour. The phone call came on a Thursday evening in November. I was making dinner pasta with marinara sauce, nothing fancy, when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew. Hi. Her voice was tentative, smaller than I remembered. Hi, sweetheart. Is this weird, calling you after all this time? It's not weird, it's wonderful. We talked for 27 minutes, not about the past, not about prison or name changes or the years of silence. We talked about ordinary things, her classes, my work, the weather in Portland versus Seattle. But underneath the surface conversation, we were both marveling at the simple miracle of being able to hear each other's voices again. I should probably go, she said eventually. I have a paper due tomorrow that I haven't started. Of course, Chloe? Yeah? Thank you for calling. It means more than you know. Thanks for answering. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. My daughter's voice sounded older, more cautious than I remembered, but it was still her. Still the person I'd missed every single day for 3 years. The calls became weekly, then twice weekly. We developed an unspoken rule: no heavy topics, no discussion of the past until we'd rebuilt trust in the present. Instead, we talked about books she was reading, cases I was working on, her growing confidence in her hiking abilities. I climbed Mount Hood last weekend, she told me during one call. Well, not the whole mountain, but one of the easier trails. I never thought I was athletic enough for something like that. You've always been stronger than you gave yourself credit for. A pause. In some ways, maybe. In others, Chloe, you survived something that would have broken most people. You're allowed to be proud of that. Are you proud of how you survived prison? The question caught me off guard. Mostly yes. I made mistakes, had moments of weakness. But I didn't let it destroy who I am fundamentally. I feel like it changed who I am fundamentally. The person I was before she trusted people, believed in justice, thought family was forever. I don't know if that person exists anymore. Maybe she evolved into someone stronger. Someone who understands that love doesn't always look like blind loyalty, that survival sometimes requires difficult choices. Is that really what you think? Or are you just trying to make me feel better? I think the daughter who called me tonight, who climbed a mountain last weekend, who's putting herself through college and building a new life, I think she's pretty extraordinary. Different from the 16-year-old I remember, but extraordinary. When she hung up that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the desperate hope of a man grasping at straws, but the quiet confidence that we were building something real. Something that acknowledged the damage of the past without being defined by it. 2 months later, she texted me something that made my heart race. Would it be crazy if I said I wanted to meet in person? Like for coffee or something? No pressure, if you think it's too soon. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, not crazy at all, whenever you're ready. Next weekend? There's a coffee shop in Portland that's kind of neutral territory. I'll be there. The coffee shop receipt in my wallet still reads, Stumptown Coffee, Pike Place Blend, $4.75. Evidence of the most important cup of coffee I've ever bought. I arrived 30 minutes early and claimed a corner table with a clear view of the door, my hands shaking as I checked my phone every few seconds. At exactly 2 p.m. Chloe walked through the door. She was scanning the room, looking for me, and for a moment I could see the uncertainty in her posture, shoulders slightly hunched, one hand gripping her purse strap like an anchor. Then our eyes met across the crowded cafe, and something in her face shifted. Not quite a smile, but a recognition that somehow managed to bridge 3 years of separation. She'd changed so much that it took my breath away. Taller, more angular, with that auburn hair Linda had mentioned, and a confidence in her movement that spoke of someone who'd learned to navigate the world independently. But when she sat down across from me, I could still see traces of the girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, sweetheart." We sat in silence for nearly a minute, just looking at each other. I wanted to memorize everything. The small scar above her left eyebrow that I didn't remember. The way she'd started wearing her hair parted on the side instead of down the middle. The silver ring on her thumb that looked handmade. "You look good," she said finally. "Healthier than I expected. Prison food is terrible, but I had a lot of time to exercise. You look," I paused, trying to find words that wouldn't sound patronizing. "You look like you've grown into yourself." That's a nice way of saying I look older. "You look like a woman who's been through something difficult and came out stronger." She ducked her head, uncomfortable with the compliment. I ordered ahead, vanilla latte, extra shot. My caffeine addiction has gotten pretty serious in college. Some things never change. "You've been drinking vanilla lattes since you were 12. You remember that?" "I remember everything about you, Chloe. Being away didn't change that." Her composure wavered slightly. "I wasn't sure if I know 3 years is a long time. People change. I changed." "Tell me how." She stirred her latte, gathering her thoughts. "I used to think the world was basically fair. That bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. And if you just worked hard and were honest, everything would work out. And now? Now I know that terrible things happen to innocent people all the time. That sometimes the system fails, that sometimes good people get destroyed by circumstances beyond their control." She looked up at me. "But I also learned that surviving unfair circumstances doesn't make you a victim forever. It can make you stronger, more empathetic, more aware of how precious normal moments really are. Like sitting in a coffee shop with your father?" "Like sitting in a coffee shop with my father." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her social work major, how experiencing our family's trauma had made her want to help other families navigate crisis. I told her about my forensic accounting work, how understanding financial fraud from the inside had made me better at spotting it in other cases. "I need to tell you something," she said as we prepared to leave, "about the name change. Chloe, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I need you to understand that it wasn't about rejecting you. It was about survival, but it was also about protecting you." "Protecting me?" "Kids at school weren't just cruel to me. They were saying terrible things about you. Things I knew weren't true, but hearing them every day," her voice cracked slightly, "I was afraid I'd start believing them. I was afraid that if I stayed Chloe Wellington, eventually I'd become someone who doubted your innocence. So you became Chloe Brennan to preserve your faith in me. I became Chloe Brennan so that someday, when the truth came out, I could come back to being your daughter without carrying all that poison with me." I reached across the table and took her hand, the first physical contact we'd had in 3 years. Her fingers were cold from her ice drink, but she didn't pull away. "You never stopped being my daughter, not for a single day. Even when I didn't visit those last few months. Even then. Especially then. Because I knew you were protecting yourself the only way you could." She squeezed my hand. "I want to try being Chloe Wellington again. Not all at once, not immediately, but I want to try. Only if that's what you want." Not because you think you owe it to me. I want to try because I miss her. I miss the person who believed in happy endings and trusted that love was stronger than circumstances. Maybe she was naive, but she was also hopeful. I'd like to find a way to be hopeful again. As we walked out of the coffee shop together, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my arrest. The simple pleasure of being with my daughter. Not the desperate gratitude of a man who'd lost everything. Not the careful politeness of two strangers rebuilding trust. But the comfortable companionship of a father and daughter who'd weathered a storm and found each other on the other side. Same time next week? She asked as we reached her car. I'll be here. Dad, yeah? I'm glad you wrote that letter. I'm glad you came to Portland. I wasn't ready before, but I think maybe I'm ready now. Ready for what? Ready to stop punishing myself for surviving. Ready to believe that we can have a relationship that isn't defined by what we lost, but by what we found. She hugged me then briefly, carefully, but genuinely. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was truly free. The divorce papers with amendments arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after my first coffee meeting with Chloe. I'd almost thrown them away, assuming they were just final paperwork from my long finalized divorce. But something about the legal letterhead made me look closer. Karen had filed a motion to terminate my parental rights in 2022 while I was still in prison, before my appeal had even been heard. I called Chloe immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Dad, you sound upset. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you know that your mother tried to legally terminate my parental rights while I was in prison? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Chloe, she told me it was just paperwork. To make things easier for college applications, financial aid. Her voice was small, confused. She said since you were in prison anyway, it wouldn't change anything practical. But you were 18 by then. It wouldn't have affected your college applications. Another long pause. I didn't know that. She said it would help me get more financial aid if I was legally considered to have only one parent. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar rage that had sustained me through 3 years of wrongful imprisonment. But this time it wasn't directed at corrupt cops or incompetent lawyers. It was directed at my ex-wife, who'd used our daughter's trust to try to erase me permanently from their lives. Chloe, I need to tell you some things about those last few months before my conviction. Things your mother may not have told you accurately. What kind of things? Can we meet? This isn't something I want to discuss over the phone. That afternoon, we sat in the same coffee shop where we'd had our reunion, but this time, Chloe looked wary, guarded in a way she hadn't been during our previous meetings. Before I say anything else, I began. I want you to know that I'm not trying to turn you against your mother. She's been your primary support system for 3 years, and I respect that. But there are some things you deserve to know about what happened while I was imprisoned. Okay, I pulled out the legal documents and spread them across our small table. These show that your mother didn't just try to terminate my parental rights. She also petitioned the court to prevent me from contacting you while my appeal was pending. Chloe's face went pale. What does that mean? It means she legally blocked me from calling you, writing to you, or having any contact whatsoever during the last 18 months of my imprisonment. But you stopped calling. You stopped writing. I thought, her voice broke. I thought you'd given up on me. I never stopped trying to contact you. The prison blocked my calls because of your mother's court order. My letters were returned, unopened. I thought you'd decided you didn't want to hear from me anymore. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. She told me you weren't trying to contact me anymore. She said prison had changed you, that you'd told your lawyer you wanted to be left alone to focus on your appeal. I never said that. I would never say that. She showed me documents. Legal papers that looked official. Do you remember what they said exactly? Chloe wiped her eyes with her napkin. Something about how contact with family members was disrupting your legal preparation. How you'd requested no visitors or calls until after your appeal was decided. Those documents were fake, sweetheart, or at best they were misrepresented to you. Why would she do that? It was the question I'd been dreading, because answering it honestly meant destroying whatever relationship Chloe still had with her mother. But she deserved the truth. I think she was trying to protect herself from the possibility that I'd be exonerated. If I came home to find that she'd turned my daughter against me, filed for divorce, and moved on with her life, she'd look like the villain in the story. So she made it look like you'd abandoned us first. That's what it seems like. Chloe stared at the legal documents, her hands trembling. The name change, she pushed for that too. Said it would help me heal, help me move forward. But really, it was another way to erase me from your life before I could defend myself. Oh my God, Chloe put her head in her hands. I spent 3 years thinking I was weak for not being able to handle staying connected to you. But she was actively preventing me from staying connected to you. You weren't weak, Chloe. You were manipulated by someone who was supposed to protect you. I need to confront her. I need to hear her explain this. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? She looked up at me, and I saw steel in her eyes that reminded me of myself during the worst days of my trial. I've been ready for 3 years. I just didn't know what questions to ask. I'll come with you if you want, or you can handle it alone. Whatever feels right to you. I want you there. Not to fight my battles for me, but because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, because I want her to see that whatever she was trying to prevent has already happened. You're back in my life, and I'm choosing to keep you there. 2 days later, I found myself on Karen's front porch again. But this time I wasn't alone, and I wasn't begging for information about my daughter. This time, I was standing beside my daughter as she prepared to confront the woman who'd spent 3 years manipulating both of us. When Karen opened the door and saw us together, the color drained from her face. Hello, Karen, I said quietly. I think it's time we all had an honest conversation. The recording device in Chloe's purse was her idea. If we're going to do this, she'd said in the car outside Karen's house, I want documentation. I need to know what's real and what's been twisted. Karen stood in her doorway, looking between us with the expression of someone who'd been caught in a lie she'd hoped would never be discovered. Chloe, sweetheart, what are you doing here, with him? His name is Dad, Mom, and I'm here because I found out about the parental rights petition, and the no contact order, and probably a dozen other things you haven't told me. Karen's composure cracked. Come inside, both of you. This isn't a conversation for the neighbors. Her living room looked the same as it had 6 months earlier, but now I noticed things I'd missed before: new furniture that looked expensive, artwork I didn't recognize, a wedding ring on Karen's finger that definitely wasn't mine. You're remarried, I observed. Engaged, she corrected, as if that made it better. This is exactly why I tried to keep you away from Chloe. You show up and immediately start making accusations. I'm not making accusations, I said calmly. I'm making observations. Like the observation that you filed legal documents to prevent me from contacting my daughter while I was fighting for my freedom. I was protecting her. From what? From her father's phone calls? Chloe stepped forward, her voice steady but cold. Mom, I need you to explain something to me. Why did you tell me that Dad had stopped trying to contact me when you were actually blocking his attempts to contact me? Karen sat down heavily on her couch, suddenly looking older than her 52 years. You don't understand what it was like, Chloe. The media attention, the constant questions, the way people looked at us. I lived through it too, Mom. I understand exactly what it was like. No, you don't. You were focused on school, on surviving. Day to day. I was dealing with reporters calling the house, neighbors avoiding us at the grocery store, your father's legal team asking me to testify on his behalf when I wasn't even sure if he was innocent. You weren't sure if he was innocent? I couldn't keep the shock out of my voice. Corinne's face flushed. James, you have to understand, the evidence looked damning. The missing money, the access codes, Timothy pointing the finger at you. Even your own lawyer seemed to think you might take a plea deal. But I told you I was innocent. Doesn't that count for something? Of course it counted. But she stopped, realizing how her words sounded. But you decided to hedge your bets. Chloe said quietly, just in case he really was guilty. I was thinking about your future. If your father had been convicted and served his full sentence, you would have spent your entire adolescence and young adulthood defined by his crimes. The name change, the no-contact order, I was giving you options. You were making choices for me, Chloe corrected. Choices I didn't even know I was making. And what about after I was exonerated? I asked. When it became clear that I really was innocent, why didn't you immediately tell Chloe the truth? Then, Corinne's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, Chloe breathed. You were hoping I wouldn't find out. You were hoping Dad would just disappear and never try to contact me. I was hoping you could have a normal life. You'd built something good in Portland. You were happy. You were healing. I wasn't healing, Mom. I was surviving. There's a difference. Chloe's voice rose for the first time. I spent 3 years in therapy, dealing with guilt over abandoning Dad. Shame about changing my name. Confusion about why he'd stopped trying to reach me. I was carrying trauma that wasn't even real. The trauma was real, Corinne said defensively. Your father's situation caused real damage to our family. His situation? I stood up, my own composure finally breaking. Corinne, I was wrongfully imprisoned. I didn't cause this situation. I was a victim of it, just like you and Chloe. Don't you dare compare your experience to ours. You knew you were innocent. We had to live with uncertainty, with shame, with the possibility that everything we thought we knew about you was wrong. So you decided to erase me from your lives just in case? I decided to protect my daughter from further trauma. By lying to her for 3 years? The room fell silent except for the sound of Chloe crying. Not the quiet tears of sadness, but the harsh sobs of someone whose worldview was collapsing in real time. All this time, she said through her tears, I thought I was weak for not being able to handle staying loyal to you, Dad. I thought I was a terrible daughter for changing my name, for moving away, for not visiting those last few months. But I was being manipulated into making those choices. Corinne reached for her, but Chloe pulled away. Sweetheart, everything I did was out of love. No, Chloe said firmly. Love doesn't involve lying to someone about their father's attempts to contact them. Love doesn't involve filing fake legal documents. Love doesn't involve letting someone carry guilt for 3 years when you know it's based on lies. I never meant for you to feel guilty. Then what did you mean? What was the endgame here, Mom? Corinne looked between us, trapped by her own contradictions. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted you to have a father who wasn't in prison. When James was convicted, I hoped that maybe David could fill that role. She gestured toward the expensive furniture. He's a good man, successful, stable. He wanted to adopt you, to give you his name, to help pay for college without the stigma of having a convicted felon for a father. David? I looked at the engagement ring on her finger with new understanding. How long have you been with David? We met 2 years ago. 2 years ago, while I was still in prison. Yes. And he knew about the legal maneuvers? The blocked calls, the parental rights termination? Corinne's silence was damning. He suggested them, Chloe said, understanding flooding her face. This wasn't just about protecting me from trauma. This was about clearing the way for your new life. Chloe, it wasn't that simple. But Chloe was already standing, already moving toward the door. Actually, Mom, it was exactly that simple. You chose your new relationship over my relationship with my father. You just didn't have the courage to say so. As we walked to my car, Chloe turned back one last time. "I'll be changing my name back to Wellington," she called to Karen. "And if you ever lie to me again about anything, you'll lose me just as completely as you tried to make me lose Dad." The doors slammed behind us, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like justice had finally been served. The college application form marked the first time in 3 years that Chloe had written James Wellington in the emergency contact section. She showed it to me during one of our family therapy sessions, her face a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "It feels strange," she admitted to Dr. Sarah Kim, the therapist we'd been seeing together for 6 months. "Like I'm reclaiming something I'm not sure I deserve to have back." "What makes you feel like you don't deserve to have your father back in your life?" Dr. Kim asked gently. "Because I chose to leave. I chose to change my name, to move away, to stop visiting. Even if Mom was manipulating the situation, those were still my decisions." I leaned forward in my chair. "Chloe, you were 18 years old, dealing with an impossible situation. The fact that you made survival choices doesn't disqualify you from making different choices now." "But what if I hurt you again? What if I get scared and run away again?" "Then we'll deal with it," I said simply. "Relationships aren't built on guarantees, sweetheart. They're built on commitment to working through problems together." Dr. Kim nodded approvingly. "James, how has it been for you, rebuilding this relationship, while also processing your own trauma from imprisonment?" "Complicated," I admitted. "There are days when I'm angry, not at Chloe, but at the years we lost, at the system that failed us, at Karen for manipulating the situation. But then I look at who Chloe has become, and I realize that maybe those years weren't entirely lost. Maybe they were necessary for both of us to become people who could have an adult relationship built on choice rather than obligation." It was true. The past year of rebuilding our relationship had been different from anything we'd had before. We talked more honestly, laughed more easily, and trusted each other more deeply than we ever had when she was a child. The trauma had been terrible, but surviving it together had created a bond that felt unbreakable. Chloe had decided to finish her degree at Portland State, but she'd moved back to Seattle for her senior year to be closer to me. Not because she felt obligated to, but because she wanted to. We had dinner every Tuesday, took weekend hikes together, and talked on the phone most evenings. "I've been thinking about graduate school," she told me during one of our Tuesday dinners. "Social work with a focus on families affected by incarceration. Because of what we went through. Because of what I learned from what we went through. That the system doesn't just fail the person who gets wrongfully convicted, it fails their entire family. Kids like I was need advocates who understand what they're going through." I felt a swell of pride so intense it took my breath away. You want to make sure other families don't go through what we went through. I want to make sure that when they do go through it, they have better support than we did. My own career had taken a similar trajectory. My forensic accounting work had evolved into something more comprehensive. I now worked with the Innocence Project, helping exonerated prisoners navigate not just the financial aspects of rebuilding their lives, but the family relationships that had been damaged by their wrongful convictions. "It's interesting," Dr. Kim observed during one of our sessions, "how both of you have chosen to transform your trauma into service for others. It makes the suffering feel meaningful," Chloe said. "Like maybe it happened for a reason." "Do you really believe that?" I asked her. "That there was a reason for all of this?" She considered the question seriously. "I don't think there was a grand cosmic plan that required you to go to prison and me to spend 3 years thinking I'd abandoned you. But I do think that surviving it has made us both more compassionate, more aware of how precious family relationships are, more committed to fighting for justice, and more grateful for normal moments," I added. "Like Tuesday dinners and terrible movies and arguments about whether pineapple belongs on pizza." "It absolutely does not belong on pizza," Chloe said with mock seriousness. "This is why we needed therapy," I told Dr. Kim. irreconcilable differences about pizza toppings. The laughter that followed felt like healing made audible. The hardest part of rebuilding our relationship wasn't the big conversations about trauma and forgiveness. It was learning to trust that normal moments were allowed to be normal, that we could disagree about pizza without it meaning our relationship was fragile, that we could go a day without talking without it meaning either of us was pulling away. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Chloe confessed during one therapy session. "For something to happen that proves this is too good to be true. What would that something look like?" Dr. Kim asked. "I don't know. Maybe you'll decide I'm too damaged to have a healthy relationship with. Maybe I'll do something that reminds you of all the pain I caused, and you'll realize you can't forgive me after all." "Chloe, look at me," I said. "There's nothing you could do that would make me stop loving you. Nothing you could say that would make me walk away. I spent 3 years in prison dreaming of having you back in my life, and now that I do, I'm not going anywhere. Even if I have bad days, even if sometimes I still struggle with guilt or panic attacks or feeling like I don't deserve happiness. Especially then, that's when you'll need me most." 6 months later, we celebrated Christmas together for the first time in 4 years. Chloe had legally changed her name back to Wellington, and seeing "From Chloe Wellington" on my Christmas card made me cry like a child. "I have something for you," she said after we'd opened our presents. "It's not wrapped because, well, you'll see." She handed me a thick folder. Inside were copies of all the letters she'd written but never sent during my imprisonment, along with new letters she'd written over the past year, letters documenting her healing process, her growing understanding of what had happened to our family, her hopes for our future relationship. "I want you to have them," she said. "The unsent ones and the new ones. I want you to understand the whole journey, not just where we ended up." That night, I stayed up reading every word. The progression from despair to confusion to anger to understanding to hope was like watching my daughter grow up in real time. Through her own words, the last letter, dated just a week earlier, ended with, "I love you, Dad, not despite everything that happened, but including everything that happened." Our story isn't a tragedy with a happy ending, it's a love story that survived the worst circumstances imaginable. And that makes it the most beautiful story I know. The father-daughter photo from Chloe's college graduation sits framed on my desk now, a reminder that some stories have endings worth waiting for. In the picture, we're both beaming at the camera, her in cap and gown, me in the best suit I could afford. But what the photo doesn't show is the journey it took to get there, the 3 years of separation, the months of careful rebuilding, the daily choice to trust that love could survive even the worst circumstances. 2 years have passed since that graduation day, and I'm writing this from my office at the Innocence Project, where I now serve as Director of Family Reconciliation Services. It's a position that didn't exist until Chloe and I proposed it, a recognition that exoneration is just the beginning of healing for families torn apart by wrongful conviction. Chloe graduated summa cum laude with her master's degree in social work last month. Her thesis was titled "Secondary Trauma in Families of the Wrongfully Convicted, a Framework for Healing." She's now working with the Children's Justice Foundation, providing counseling and advocacy for kids whose parents are involved in the criminal justice system. "We make a good team," she told me after her first week on the job. "You help the adults rebuild their lives. I help the kids understand that their parents' situations don't define them. Just like you learned that my situation didn't define you, eventually. With a lot of therapy and one very patient father. Our relationship now is something I never could have imagined during those dark years in prison. It's built on mutual respect, honest communication, and the hard-earned understanding that love isn't always pretty or perfect. Sometimes it's just persistent. We still have our challenges. Chloe still struggles sometimes with anxiety and guilt. I still have days when the anger about our lost years threatens to overwhelm me. But we've learned to weather these storms together, to see them as temporary weather patterns, rather than permanent damage to our foundation. Karen and I have reached a civil détente. She's married to David now, and while we'll never be friends, we've managed to find a way to coexist in Chloe's life. The confrontation that day in her living room led to months of painful but necessary conversations about accountability, forgiveness, and the difference between protecting someone and controlling them. I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing, Karen told me during one of our mediated discussions. But I realize now that I was so afraid of losing Chloe that I almost made that fear into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Chloe maintains a relationship with her mother, but it's different now, boundaried, careful, built on the understanding that trust once broken takes years to rebuild. Some weeks they talk daily, other weeks they don't talk at all. Chloe has learned that she gets to decide what forgiveness looks like for her, and that it doesn't have to look like it did before. I love my mom, she explained to me recently. But I love her as an adult who understands her limitations, not as a child who needs her to be perfect. The work Chloe and I do now is deeply personal. Every family we help reminds us of our own journey, our own struggles to find each other, again after the system failed us. We speak at conferences together, sharing our story not as a tragedy that ended happily, but as proof that resilience and love can coexist with trauma and loss. The goal isn't to go back to who you were before, Chloe often tells the teenagers she counsels. The goal is to become who you're meant to be after. And sometimes, the person you become after is stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than the person you were before. I watch her work with these kids who are angry, scared, ashamed, and confused, and I'm amazed by her ability to meet them exactly where they are. She doesn't tell them their feelings are wrong or that everything will be okay. Instead, she tells them that their feelings make sense, that they're not responsible for their parents' situations, and that survival sometimes requires difficult choices that don't feel heroic. I changed my name and moved across the country when my dad was in prison, she told a group of teenagers last week. For 3 years, I thought that made me disloyal. Now I understand it made me human. Last month, we launched a new program called Second Chances that provides comprehensive support for families during the exoneration process. It includes legal advocacy, financial counseling, therapy services, and what we call reunion coaching, helping family members navigate the complex emotions of rebuilding relationships after years of forced separation. The day someone is exonerated isn't the end of their story, I explained to our board of directors. It's often the beginning of the hardest chapter, learning to trust each other again, learning to live with the knowledge that the system failed you, learning to build something new from the wreckage of what was lost. The program has helped 43 families in its first year. Some reunions are smooth and joyful. Others are complicated, messy, marked by years of built-up resentment and pain. A few don't work at all. Sometimes the damage is too deep, the trust too broken to rebuild. But each success story gives me hope. Each father who learns to hug his son again. Each daughter who stops blaming herself for her mother's conviction. Each family that finds a way to be together without pretending the trauma never happened. These victories remind me why the pain was worth it. Chloe and I celebrated the 5-year anniversary of my exoneration last month with a quiet dinner at the same coffee shop where we had our reunion. We've made it a tradition not to celebrate the injustice we survived, but to honor the relationship we rebuilt from its ashes. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd never changed my name? She asked over dessert. If I'd stuck it out, stayed Chloe Wellington through everything. Honestly, I think you would have been destroyed by it. And then when I got out, I would have come home to a daughter who was broken instead of strong. So you're glad I became Chloe Brennan for a while. I'm glad you did whatever you needed to do to survive. I'm glad you're sitting here with me now, healthy and whole, and choosing to be my daughter not because you have to, but because you want to. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a gesture that still fills me with wonder after all these years. I want to tell you something I've never said before, she said. That day you were arrested, when I was 16 and terrified, and the whole world seemed to be falling apart, even then. Even in the worst moment of my life, some part of me knew we'd find our way back to each other. Not the same way as before, but some way. What made you so sure? Because love like ours doesn't just disappear. It might get buried under trauma and fear and impossible circumstances, but it doesn't disappear. It waits, and when you're ready to dig it up again, it's still there. As I write this, my phone buzzes with a text from Chloe. Dad, I just got offered a job with the National Innocence Network. I'd be developing family support programs nationwide. Want to celebrate with Terrible? Pizza tonight? I text back immediately. With pineapple? Absolutely not. Some things never change. Thank God for that. If you've made it this far in our story, if you've stayed with us through the darkness and into the light, then you understand something important about love and resilience and the power of never giving up on the people who matter most. Maybe you're facing your own impossible circumstances. Maybe someone you love has been torn away from you by forces beyond your control. Maybe you're carrying guilt for choices you made in survival mode, or anger at a system that failed you, or grief for the years that were stolen from you. If so, I want you to know this. Healing is possible. Reconnection is possible. Love that. Survives trauma is not only possible, it's stronger than love that never gets tested. Our story isn't unique because we overcame injustice, sadly. Wrongful convictions happen far too often. Our story is unique because we chose to fight for each other, even when it seemed hopeless. Even when the easier path would have been to accept the separation as permanent. The system failed us, but we didn't fail each other. And in the end, that made all the difference. If this story has touched you, if it's reminded you of the importance of fighting for the relationships that matter most, then share it. Share your own story of resilience, of love that survived impossible odds, of families that found their way back to each other, despite everything working against them. The world needs more stories like ours. Not because they're extraordinary, but because they're proof that ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances can choose love over fear, hope over despair, connection over separation. That my daughter changed her last name and moved away while I was in prison. But she came back. We came back to each other. And that, more than my legal exoneration, more than any vindication from the courts, is the victory that matters most. Love wins. Not easily, not quickly, not without scars, but it wins. Like this video of our story touched you. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds between people who refuse to give up on each other. And in the comments, tell us about your own journey back to the people you love most, because everyone deserves a second chance at the relationships that define their lives. Everyone deserves to come home.